The MOONDROP X Crinacle DUSK. Let's talk about it. Now, this is an important release that's been teased for about a year, so we want to talk about this release carefully and cautiously because in some ways this is the best earphone that I've ever seen, or one of the best dollar for dollar, and in some ways it's the worst. So let's really take some time and do this review right. Let's start off talking about the build. The case itself is really nice, it's really quality, it's really premium, and I enjoy it. Now, the shell design is really nice. It's a little bit larger than the Afu Magic 1, but I think it's pretty. It has a nice faceplate. I like being able to look into a shell, and it's not too big and it's not too small. The nozzle is a lot smaller than the other ones. If you compare this to, say, the Fat Frequency here, it is a lot smaller and light, and it's really comfortable in ear. So in that regards, A+. They did a great job with this shell. Now the cable, it does come with a DSP cable, and this is something we will talk about later, but for the first part of this, let's just say that the build quality of this DSP cable is very, very nice. I really like it, and I wish the analog cable was built the exact same way. The analog cable feels chintzy. It feels like a $10 product. It does not have the best build quality. It's not a bad cable, but it doesn't feel premium. Then there's the waifu. This is the last time we're going to talk about her. Now let's talk about the overall sonic impression of this IEM. It's a real Jekyll and Hyde style IEM. For the analog presentation of this IEM, I do not think it's a very strong value at all. Some reviewers in the past have talked about IEMs according to their price category. If I had to give this a price, it probably would be somewhere between the $150 to maybe $170. I don't think it's hyper competitive, and we will talk about many IEMs that I think are on the level of this analog IEM. So let's look at the graph of this IEM. You can notice that the channel matching's pretty good. I think it's basically perfect, and I don't have any problems with it. Overall, it comes across really flat, really basic, really neutral, and I don't think it's a bad tuned IEM. But I don't think it's very competitive in our current market of IEMs. So let's look at some other IEMs and talk about some of those as well. The first comparison that I wanted to compare is the Blessing 2 DUSK. This is the original DUSK before this, the one done like 4 years ago. In my opinion, they both have similar bass responses, but the DUSK 2 has a little bit better vocals. It's a little bit more fun. I think the Crinacle DUSK does have a little bit better extension, and I think the new drivers that they put in there they're pretty good, and I think they're doing some good things there. I think overall the upper treble and air regions are really nice in the Crinacle DUSK, but if you want to just talk about all the way up to about 8K, which was really accurate on a coupler, I have to say that the Blessing 2 DUSK is a better IEM. If you're thinking about upgrading because for an analog reason, let me be crystal clear. I do not think you should upgrade over the Blessing 2 DUSK if you're just going for the analog version of this. So let's get into a few other IEMs that might be good for you if you want to upgrade. If you want something that has a similar sound signature as this, the Pula PA02 or the CKLVX 1DD plus 4BA, yes, those are both mouthfuls and kind of janky, but I think those are actually better versions of what the Crinacle DUSK is trying to portray. They have this similar bass response, similar upper mids, both really neutral, both kind of boring, both don't have a whole lot going on. I mean, the Crinacle DUSK is maybe a slight edge better, but all three of these IEMs have comfortable shells and are not bad IEMs. Comfortable, with no major issues. Let's look at another IEM that I think is better. This is the graph of the Giz-Audio Chopin. Now the Giz-Audio Chopin has a much better dip here around 5-6K, more energy in the vocals, a little bit better bass region, and it fits my target curve really well for $100. Let's say $160. It's basically half the price of the MOONDROP X Crinacle DUSK. Now, I do think for some people are going to find that the Crinacle X DUSK is a much more comfortable IEM. Those that are used to larger shells, this is going to be a much better IEM. If you normally don't like IEMs, I still have to recommend that you try the Binary X Giz Audio Chopin, because it does have a really nice fit. It does have a nice V, it's tactful, it feels good, it has good detail and treble extension. It's really something that I think you should consider over the Crinacle DUSK, especially if you're using it in analog. I mean, how does it compare? Crinacle has a lot of IEMs. I think, it's debatable. You look at the Dioko, and I did not like the Dioko, but I think the Crinacle DUSK is a much better version of that. It's a little bit more smooth in the upper mids, and it's just a better overall IEM with a lot less trying to treble crazy planar energy. Now, I know the planar driver has some interesting things, but I don't know. I just think this was a better IEM overall than the Dioko, and I don't really think the Dioko is very competitive for a lot of reasons. The Crinacle 02 is a nicely tuned IEM for budget users. Again, the high-end Crinacle. The Crinacle's coming out with a lot of collabs, and he's even teasing a new one called Project Blue, which I have no idea. But there's a lot of Crinacle IEMs that are coming out, that have come out, that if you already have those, I think if you're just going to use the Crinacle DUSK and DSP, it's an absolute skip. Let's look at a few others. Now, I recently reviewed the Singolo, and I really like the Singolo. I think the Singolo has fit problems, but if like, let's say you want something that's like the Truth There Red with an impedance adapter, the Singolo is a very nice sounding IEM. It sounds very resolute, and I feel like it has kind of a better resolution and detail than a lot of other IEMs. Now look, the Crinacle X DUSK is a better IEM, but not by a huge margin. Again, it depends on what you want. I don't know. There's things to be said about the Crinacle DUSK that are really nice and really good, but the sound characteristics of it, I don't know. I think you might be able to skip it if you really do like the Singolo or the Red. You're getting about the same profile as the Crinacle Red without an impedance adapter, so if you like that bass level, this might be a thing to go. It has nice upper mids, a lot of good things going on. I don't think the point that I'm trying to make is that Crinacle makes a lot of pretty decent, pretty reasonable IEMs that aren't bad. And these are some examples that if you already have one, I really don't think the Moondrop X Crinacle DUSK is super competitive. Now, this is going to get interesting. Let's talk about the DSP. Now, I personally didn't graph the DSP, but I will look to try to do that here in the next couple days. The DSP is really nice, and it sounds really good, and it is something that I will give you an easy recommendation on. Let's talk a little bit more about why that's such a good recommendation and how much of a good recommendation this will be. Now, let's talk about how I'm going to rank this IEM and talk about it really briefly. I think DSP IEMs are kind of a funny thing. I don't really want to rank them. I don't really want to talk about EQ'd IEMs very frequently. But since this is an important release, I'm going to talk about it and kind of set a standard of how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be reviewing and ranking like DSP IEMs in their own level. I think after EQ, oftentimes it puts the IEM in a much different category, and it's not always a fair comparison. I think the analog version of the Crinacle DUSK is very overpriced for what it is. It is, it has a nice resolution, it has some nice things going on, but when you add DSP to it, it really can enhance this IEM and makes it a much better value. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So it does score a perfect score of being at a very good value, but that's kind of the problem, is that this IEM is very unique and special and kind of odd placed in the market. So to summarize kind of how I feel about the DUSK DSP, I think the DUSK DSP is a really nice experience. You have stuff like the Odyssey Maxwell that really gets you about 98% of the way there and has a really great thing going on. I think the problem with the DUSK DSP is that you can only really use it on Android phones. I can't really use it on my old iPhone 13, and I've heard problems with people trying to utilize this on their current gen iPhone phones. So either you use it as a DSP IEM or you use it on a computer, which most computers have access to EQ. So it creates an interesting position where whether a good product is a good product or a good product is a good product because of its frequency response. Its packaging and accessories are kind of average for the price point, but it is a comfortable shelled IEM. And when you do get the DSP working, it is very, very nice, and I have zero problems with it. Music sounds great on it. I personally have found a use for this because sometimes at night I like to listen to music on my Android phone while I do other things or whatnot. And I think if you have that Android phone where you can utilize this from, or you have a computer where you can plug this DSP in and utilize it from there and have another Android phone as well, that's another good option. The other tunings of the DUSK DSP are also very nice, and I really enjoyed the ones that I tried. Again, I think this is an interesting product, not a perfect product, but not a bad product. If you're thinking about getting an analog IEM, I can't really recommend this for you, but if you do have a use case for this DSP IEM, if you are someone who just wants a really good product and you can see yourself using the DSP cable at your office or on the go, I think then you have a really great IEM, and then it is really worthwhile to use. Now, there is a case scenario to use Aquidolix and say a different IEM as well and just EQ that to your liking. The reason that this might be good for you is that it is really easy to utilize. I had zero problems utilizing the app, and I'm old, and I had no problems downloading it on my Android phone when I'm a pretty new Android phone user. It was not a challenging experience. It wasn't a bad experience, but it's not on my Apple phone, so that kind of is lame. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if you're going to go Android, or if you're going to go analog, this isn't the way to go. But if you're going to go DSP, this is a great product. And I highly consider it for the case use of a DSP IEM because you don't have to worry about dongle DACs. It's a very simple case where you just plug it into your USB port and it works great. I think that's really all I have to share with the DUSK. It's an interesting release. I like this IEM, but I don't really love it, and I can't recommend it to people that are traditional. DSP is the way to go. The cable is not great, but as a DSP IEM, it's really quite enjoyable. It's a really high, powerful, great product that I can recommend to people. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. You're still here. It's over. Go home. Go watch another IEM video. It's done. That's the entire video. What more do you want?